welcome our next TED-like talk speaker.
Good morning. I'm Falguni. I think I'll leave a lot of my introduction out, but I'd like to add a little more that I've been into like social innovation and tech impact for a while now. And at Merkle also, I had the opportunity of exploring a lot more about, different technologies and how they affect our lives. I also, like outside of this, I've been mentoring and guiding designers for almost a decade now. So let's dive into this. I thought it would be a really interesting topic. Seeing that we are a country of 1 billion people and everybody is so different from each other, a lot of times it so happens that a lot of things that we study in design, you have to throw it out of the window. They do not fit in with the kind of crowd that we work with. So let's begin. I'll just get started with this. Yeah, so for starting, I want you to imagine how many people do we really design for, and think about, in general, every day, day to day, how many people, since we also talk about impact, how many people do we really design for? Any guesses? Percentages, anything works. No, how many people do we really design for? The number or a percentage, anything, yeah? 5? Okay, you're, I would say, kind of there. So imagine this, what you see behind to be all the people of the world. This is how many people we design for on a daily basis, right? Which kind of also gives a new meaning to the tip of the iceberg, right? We are right there, kind of just building things for the top 10%. And there are reasons why. There's a lot to read about on this by World Economic Forum and also Internet Society Pulse. So everybody can take a look at it. So I'll just, So when I'm done with the talk, a few things I want all of you to have a clear idea of. The first is the difference between designing at scale versus specific users, designing for impactful outcomes, moving fast while learning, creating an inclusive, flexible design plan, and ensuring consistent, streamlined workflows. So we'll move on to the first one, the first section of this. I think there's some sound issue. I'll just continue, yeah. So what do we talk about when we talk about designing at scale versus specific users? I think all of us are designers here, or somebody who works with designers. We talk a lot about this thing, target audience, right? And we pull it into a very crisp understanding. We make personas, we do a lot of how might we use, we do a lot of jobs to be done, frameworks. But when you talk about billions, you don't really have a very specific target. So how do you design in that case? So let's talk about designing strategies for a diverse audience. I have a group of diverse audience in front of you. We have people who are traveling, who are sitting in the park. We have families, we have people who are working. But is this really diverse audience? By diverse, we are talking about all of them as well. And these are the people that form 90% of the population. And I'm talking about India, but it holds true in the entire global south as well. And this is where a lot of research comes in the beginning, and asking the right questions. There are a few things about asking the right question, right? Who are our customers? What should we build? What opportunities exist? And what is the right thing to build? And are we even building the right thing right? And does it even meet the customer's expectations? And do users interpret your product or your service as intended? Oftentimes you see that when there are products outside, people start using it in a different way. It could give our products, visions and innovation that even, the team didn't think of. So do they interpret it that way? And a lot of times they kind of misuse it, they kind of end up misusing the product. So what happens in a case like that also? So all of these things are very important, broader questions when we talk about designing for diversity. So also when we ask them the questions, it's important to ask them at the right time. So when is the right time, and how will you know that it's the right time right now? The very literal answer to this is all the time. It's honestly that simple. A lot of times throughout the product research cycle, the research ends at the research phase and it doesn't continue ahead. But as researchers, designers, developers, it's everybody's kind of like duty to probe more and ask more questions and constantly keep solving. Like, find that puzzle to solve. We'll move on to the second one, which is designing for impactful outcomes. Imagine you're trying to hail a ride, right? All of us have, I think, even if the people who are not a part of Bangalore, I think you've got a taste of the traffic situation in Bangalore, and we can talk about that across other cities in India. So imagine hailing a ride. A lot of times our apps don't work. We have to physically stand on the street, do it the old way, and try to, hail a rickshaw or hail a cab. And how do you know in busy roads, how do you know that if something is occupied or, unoccupied? There's a very standard thing that everybody thinks that, there's a sign of the taxi on or off. A lot of places have a free or a busy sign on it. But also, imagine do it under harsh sunlight. It's impossible to understand, if a light is on, if something's occupied or not. What I can, for you to kind of understand this a little more, if you go outside right now, try to use your mobile phones. On the highest setting of brightness, you still won't be able to see it. Anything. You'll kind of have to put a shade over it. So these are the things that we are still trying to solve. There's no answer to all of this. There's a case study done by us that I'd like to take you folks through. It's about how users view AI-generated content in political ads. It's a comparative study between an Indian audience and the American audience. So usually when there's a content or there's a video, there's usually the speaker who's talking and there's a background with it. There's a foreground and a background. But very interestingly, the perception of people is very different in these cases. In the case of the Indian audience, when we are talking about, in case we're using some politicians' face is a little altered, or if we are kind of using some deep technologies to make videos, the Indian audience is quite indifferent to it. They're like, it's okay, as long as these people exist in reality, we are good to go. We don't really need to know anything. Whereas the American audience becomes suspicious about it. They want to know, is this person not serious enough about the campaign? Why did they not shoot a real video? Are they unwell? I think I could give a classic example of what happened to Kate Middleton very recently, where they were kind of trying to show a lot of videos, and people started to count the number of fingers on a hand to identify if the content shown is real or not. And that sparked a lot of controversy. Whereas if we talk about the background being altered, the Indian audience becomes very suspicious, right? They're like, oh wow, is this railway station, does this railway station actually exist the way they're showing it? Whereas the American audience does not care about the infrastructure, which gives us a very interesting insight into the minds of these audiences. Having access to good to better infrastructure is a standard in the American audience's mind. For the Indian audience, where we have accessibility issues, we are trying to understand if there's something and we don't have access to it. Sorry about that. So in the Indian audience's mind, they want access to the things that they are seeing, and it seems very out of reach. And they're probably thinking that we were promised this and we're not getting it, but where is this? We want to talk about this to other people. So it tells you a lot about people's mindsets. And if you're designing for billions of people, you have to make sure that you satisfy both these mindsets at the same time. So talking about strategy, which bridges research and execution, right? A few things that we have to talk about and understand and discuss more is actually, first of all, bringing strategy into the minds of designers and having designers also participate in the process of it, right? But while doing that, we have to identify these universal patterns, have key insights. The key insights is not exactly what the users tell you. It's more often the things that they do not tell you, right? And you have to set strategic design goals, and your design goals can also kind of inform the company's goal, the organization's goal, the product goals, and localized design solutions. So when you're building, everybody knows about design systems, it's being talked about a lot. There's like a lot of possibility where we localize a few things and work around and, like kind of make space for that to have some regional acceptance. Prioritize accessibility. There should always be some way that, you are able to kind of like give more and be more accessible to everybody around you. Could be through stories, could be through, again, all of these things kind of come together and you can kind of like work on accessibility at the same time. And test and validate across segments. This is a really important part. User researchers and designers come together and you have to test edge cases, you have to test for failure. Another thing is that when you are designing a very big topic over here is designing for forgiveness. We all design to prevent errors, but this is a bigger insight than that, where if a user makes an error, you account for that. You've already accounted for that. The user shouldn't be punished in any way for the error that they have caused. It should be allowed that they make an error and the system still works really well. Moving on to the third one, how do we move fast while learning? So 80% of product and tech professionals agree that research should happen at all stages of the product development process, whereas only 36% actually conduct research after launch. And we're talking after launch. We are not even talking about throughout the process, like the numbers are very bleak, right? And this kind of research that we're talking about, it can take different forms. The first one that we also practice with Fortune 50 companies as an organization is rolling research. What that means is you have regular scheduled research. It also gives you very quick feedback from the users, while also making sure that there are smaller iterations happening and you can keep working on it. And the second one I think everybody is more aware of, which is customer-centric design processes. So you keep folding the learning into your processes. Both of these are slightly different, but if done together, works really well. We'll move on to the fourth one, which is creating an inclusive and flexible design plan. So how is it that you create a plan that kind of includes everybody in the process? Designing inclusive experiences, what does that mean? I think everybody knows how building blocks work, right? These are things that transcend languages, cultures. There are people everywhere using it. You'll find a kid who's barely even able to walk. They're trying to piece things together. It's come to a point that we are using blocks and other things for design thinking now, right? Everybody is using it. You can prototype with it. You can do a bunch of things with it. So this is what your design language should ideally move towards. Nothing is perfect, but you should ideally move towards this. Another case study of ours is with a well-known wellness and nutrition brand. And as a part of their journey and us creating strategy, earlier they had placed themselves as a weight loss brand, right? And when we started working on the strategy, our team suggested that we move away from that and move into the wellness and nutrition brand towards a more holistic approach, right? And this company right now is in over 90 countries. So you can only imagine, and everybody speaks different languages, right? Right now you can see on your screen that, this is working in English, but we've also accounted for, a right to left script. So how do you even design for that? It can't change a lot. You're building on, bigger design systems. So if you see over here, we are kind of trying to understand their goals. We are not pushing weight loss on them, but what is it that they would want? And do they know a few more things? And what kind of activities do they regularly engage in? If you notice in India, a lot of people go for morning walks, evening walks, right? It's very different in other countries. They might go for weekend hikes. So just to understand how often they do it and what are the activities they do it and what activities actually help them feel healthy, right? So these are the different ways we are kind of trying to build the product out also for them. So how do you craft inclusivity? This is like a snapshot of everything of how do you craft inclusivity. This takes you from insights to innovation. This is where that break happens, that disruption really happens. Use of familiar visual cues, things that you see around you, the colors, you can match colors, try to do that with regional. And it's completely possible to do it at the level of design systems also, even if they're very global. Intuitive navigation with limited text. Limited text helps you kind of, again, the lesser language you use, the lesser written language you use, the better it is to kind of, today you're kind of, you've launched the product in region A, tomorrow you can maybe, in a week's work, you can launch it in region B. Incorporating local aesthetics, very important. Think about the aesthetics that we grow up with. Like, if you look at the Indian trucks, they are very beautiful, they are very quirky, right? They demand attention. So how is it that you can incorporate these aesthetics in it? Layered complexity. Again, when we are talking about everybody, we are talking about inclusiveness. Bigger formats or bigger forms may or may not work for everybody, but a layered approach kind of works really well. One of the things we use in design, it's called progressive disclosure when we are kind of working with layered complexity, right? Engaging visual content. Another example I'll give you is in the newspapers, if you look up, there are these small comics that talk about a lot of politics, that talk about the economy. So those are the kind of bites that Indians really understand very well, and people all across the world have their own way of doing it, right? Incorporate feedback loops. Again, I'm kind of like going in and out of this constantly because it's very important so that, even I keep talking about it, so that everybody keeps talking about it. The feedback does not stop as the product is launched and you kind of like, you don't pack your bags and go home. It has to happen constantly. And localized content and personalization. I think going back to the idea, the Indian trucks that I talked about, you have really funky slogans written on it, really amazing phrases. They'll kind of make you, I've seen people take pictures of that posted on Twitter. So if you incorporate that humor also within your design, it kind of sticks with people really well. So how do we also ensure consistent and streamlined workflows? So the 4 things that I already talked about, they kind of come together in a loop format. They might intersect, they might work in parallel to actually ensure consistent, streamlined workflows. But to give you an example, I'll take you through a very short instance that I faced in my career. So when we're talking about getting a lot of feedback from people, we usually do a lot of remote testing, especially in rural areas, peri-urban areas, right? And there was this project that I was working on in one of the rural areas. And before going in full testing mode, we were testing small chunks of it. And we were getting amazing results from it. So we were doing it one-to-one, right? And we were kind of wondering that, like at the end of it, we'll get a very good result when we give out a larger survey to them. But what ended up happening was all the 5 stars and all the thumbs up, everything that we had imagined in our brain, came down to a 1-star rating. And this was like 2 years worth of work, right? With the rural population, it's very difficult. We kind of like went back to see either we had misinterpreted what we had understood, or it was, we couldn't understand what they exactly needed, or maybe it didn't come together really well. So we went back to them and we tried to understand, do they even understand what feedback is, right? Because it's very easy to sit on your cushy chair and imagine or just think that people understand what feedback is. But when we went there, they were really happy with the product. So what was the reason we were getting a 1-star? The answer of this was very simple. They understand 1 with 8 number, right? 8 number means it's very good, it's the best, it's first. So they gave us a 1-star rating for that. And so we had to work around our feedback and change the way we were collecting feedback from them. So even the feedback part is really important when we are talking about culture and inclusivity. These are like just some takeaways on a broader scale that you can take away from this. Understanding context and familiarity, extremely important. Design for flexibility and forgiveness. Again, forgiveness is not being talked about enough while designing. And gradual and localized design. That's all. Thank you.